Hey Brendan, how are you doing?
Good, I'm doing well, AJ. How are you?
I'm good. So, what got your interest into the Canyonlands? Because it is an interesting horror western kind of film that you got yourself into.
uh, well, it kind of started way back when I was younger. I lived in southwestern Colorado for a long time, not far from Moab at all. And we used to go down during the off seasons and stuff from the mountains and hang out in Moab, and just fell in love with the area. It's pretty spectacular in a lot of different ways. And when I was thinking about you know doing the project, it really first started with that. I was like, um, where it was a cool place that it could be something different. Everyone's looking for the same but different.
Yeah,
And just from my past personal experiences in the area, it just came to mind of like a really cool place that it's not used a lot, I guess, in the horror genre, and that could naturally build up the tension, so to speak, of just being out there in the remoteness and lost in the canyon sort of thing. It just seemed to me that that would work as an environment for a horror film or thriller.
right. And what was it like getting the cast involved in this? Because everybody did their parts well in the Canyonlands. So, how was it like just getting to know the cast and casting everybody in that process?
Yeah, there was almost two different processes for casting. I had a casting director in LA for the main parts of Stephanie and Wayne and Marcus, and then the contest winners, the unlucky victims, so to speak. All kind of knew each other. They all went to Emerson College in Boston, which has a lot of alumni in the industry. Our editor went to Emerson, our DP went to Emerson, and they all kind of knew each other a little bit. And so I had a little bit of a casting pool to pick out of for these for those smaller, well, not necessarily smaller roles, but roles that I didn't go through the casting director with.
And how was it like working with the band on the original score of this too?
Well, that was a great experience. I've been an Humphreys McGee fan for a long time, since the first time I saw them. I think it was Bonnaroo 2002. I used to be a roadie for bands back in the day, and then I got too old to do that. But yeah, working with Brendan and Jake was an amazing experience. It's not something people, if you're familiar with their music, like progressive rock kind of jam bandy stuff, that you would think would be good for horror music, but they're extremely talented musicians, like the whole band is, but particularly Brennan and Jake. And they really were able to put together that kind of feel that I was looking for, kind of like a southwesterny feel to it, but
Yeah.
also elevate the tension. And I didn't want it to be that busy of a score necessarily, because a lot of the tension out there sometimes, because I've been out there in the desert, is the quietness and just being the alone feeling of being like, wow, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. If something was going to happen, there's no one, there's no fire department, there's no 911, there's no cell service. And so I was looking for something that was a little bit laid back, and not too, overpowering. And I think they knocked it out of the park.
Right, because the subtleness of it, like you said, is really what brings the tension out. So I'm always curious, like with the discussions between the people who are doing the composing, the composing of the film and the directors. Do you guys like have a rapport of how you guys really talk back and forth of how one envisions how that score should sound?
Yeah, there was definitely a back and forth. It was their first time doing a score, so they definitely needed some direction there, and I spent time out there recording with them. Uh, Interesting. The only homework I gave them was to check out Resner's score for The Social Network. Not that it's a horror, but I just think it's a really good example of what you can do with minimal notes to really build
Yeah.
a feeling of a film. It's like Resner plays like 3 or 4 notes in that entire film almost, and it's great. So I kind of point him in that direction. But yeah, I mean, we'd go through the first stuff. I'd make notes on them, just like any other process of editing or whatever. They would turn something in, I would make notes and send it back to them. I let them more do their thing, kind of. I mean, I'm kind of a fan of let the people that you hire do the work that you hired them to do. And so, I definitely gave them a little direction of, hey, this is, I want to maybe build it up here or do this, but I gave them, I think the space that they needed to, be creative and come out with their own stamp on it.
That's awesome that you bring up the Social Network score, because that's also one of my most recent favorites to ever come out in the 2010s. And when I was dabbling in music a little bit, I sampled the Social Network and I just added speeches through California Casing to like bits and pieces of the Social Network score. So that's awesome that you bring the Social Network up.
Well, I believe he won an Oscar for that film, so I think a lot of people thought they did a good job. But in this particular case, I just think it's a great example of having an impactful score with a minimalistic approach to the music.
Right. And in movies like The Canyonlands, a score could almost act like a monster in the background too, depending on its subtleness, and it's almost like a character of its own. Is that kind of what you had envisioned for it as well?
Yeah, I mean, in the horror genre, just sound in general just becomes so much more important. I spent a lot of time watching this particular film without any music when you're editing and putting it all together. And there's times when it should be scary when it's not. When there's no music in the background, you could put happy clown music in the background.
Yeah.
And you could really manipulate how people are feeling, whether you're building temperature with tension, whether you're releasing tension, whether you're just putting somebody in a stark environment or whatever. You can always just kind of accent the mood and bring an audience to where you want them to go through the music. So in that regard, yeah, it was definitely something that I was thinking about. It was one of the first things I really thought about the film, other than the locale, was the sound of this. How is this all going to sound together? Because I always had the idea to add the Humphreys guys with Native American music, which on paper doesn't sound like it's an easy mix. But I think in the how it all came out, it really, really blended well together for different points in the film.
And when you were filming the Canyonlands, were there any difficult like parts that you had to shoot because of the way the scenery was in like this location that you had? Was there just any difficult parts of the film to shoot?
Yeah, pretty much the whole thing. The location was amazing, right? I mean, that was the nearest we could be to Canyonlands National Park without being on BLM land or in the park, which you can't film unless you're doing educational movies. And our river filming permit went right to the borderline of the park. So anything that's called the Canyonlands or take advantage of this area, I felt like it really needed to be shot there as opposed to just kind of sprinkling in. I live in Vegas. I could have shot this 20 minutes from my house, a lot easier and cheaply, more cheaper, with just some establishing shots from the Canyonlands. But I really felt like we had to go there and be there and really place the characters in this environment for it to work. And so being there was great. From a production aspect, it was difficult to say the least. We were 20 miles outside of Moab at the end of a 4x4 only road that went over a pass. Anything that came in, we had no cell service. There's no water, there's no electricity. It was all solar, that sort of thing. We had to bring everything in. And then there was no really going back to town either, for the cast or the crew. Like we were just out there for a month, which had its benefits for sure. But, every day but one of our shooting schedule was outside, obviously. And we got hailed on, rained on, thunder and lightning on, 60-mile-an-hour winds. We only shut down one day, which was amazing. And it rained on the only day we shot inside, which was also extremely lucky.
That is lucky, shooting at a place like this where you only had to shut down for one day. That had to be highly gratifying in that retrospect.
Yes. Luna, yes. Hey, hi. Yeah, especially being on a tight schedule. We couldn't really afford to go over both monetarily and with time. The place where we shot at is private land, and I had rented out. That's called Base Camp Adventure Lodge, and rented out the whole place. And Tom, the proprietor, was having a wedding the next weekend. Like, we need to get done. And May is usually a beautiful time in Moab. Not very rainy, 70, 80 degrees. It was perfect on paper. May 2019 for Moab was seasonably cold. And we were shooting in, like, 40 degrees outside. And of course the cast has to be, in their summer stuff and pretend like it's warm out and stuff when it wasn't. It presented a lot of logistical nightmares, but in the end, we managed to pull it off, and that's, I guess, all that really matters.
Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really fun, and congratulations on the Canyonlands.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate the interview.
And have a great day.
Thank you, you too.